God's choice, his decisions within and without our world. Here's the outline. I will first talk about creation and bring in something from the book of Genesis, some distinctions, which I will identify with differences in the Hebrew language, and design how the world is created and how it could have been different, how God could have made different choices from without the world when he created the world with different alternative designs. And then I'll talk about nature, especially human nature, what we are from the book of Genesis. And then I'll talk about God and present a philosophical argument for the reality of God. And of course, given some background, the theory, my choice theory of possibility, metaphysical possibility, which will be touched on in the background. So the first session, creation, how is it that there is the world at all? Work, achievement, what it is for anyone to do any work. So of course, first there's this Hebrew word bara, which is translated in, at least in New English translation, as create, which I think I would use the term generation to generate something in terms of in contrast to the following. So transformation, which in Hebrew would be asa, translated as make, and transformation. I would like to contrast these transformation and generation with the following. So in chapter 1, verse 7, God made firmament, expanse, a vault. It's like later on we understood that as the sky, and rakia, which has the root raker, which is to beat, hammer out, spread out. So it's like the same materials. Matter is transformed in different shapes, and so to transform a certain thing given the same material differs from to generate, let's say, some new material. So so it is in this context that we understand what it is to create our world, to create the world from nothingness. There were no world at all, no anything, but to create the world, to bring the world into being. That differs from, let's say, to create a sculpture from a lump of clay. So the sculptor constituted a certain clay into a certain arrangement, which constitute a sculpture. So there seems, well, there's no new matter that's been generated, but at least the transformation, there is something new ontologically, which is the sculpture. So that's the difference between these two notion, generation and transformation. But then, because the book of Genesis in Hebrew, in the Torah, in the beginning, but then so there seems to be a beginning, right? But I want to propose a world view that the world has infinite space and infinite time. So this spatial temporality, which is infinite, characterizes our world. With that, I understand the qualification in the beginning, well, as a metaphor, because that's when it was without our world. There was no world. There was even there's no nothingness, not anything at all. And then there's something which is the world. Then there's something. It is only a metaphor that God created the world in at least time and also maybe also space time, but because that's the only way we understood creation in terms of generation or any work done, it is in space-time. So that's how we understand. So that it's just a literary device, we pretended spatial temporality with regard to God's action, and God didn't in fact act within the world. It is not a worldly act. It is through a pretense that it is a worldly act, that it is in space-time. So it is fictitiously a worldly act, the act of creation. So it is only an approximated understanding. We try to understand what God did in creation, having redescribed what we couldn't have understood in a way that we would. So it's only an approximation. So that's how I understand creation, how it is that the world, or anything at all, such as the world, is generated from nothingness, of not from anything at all. So, but then, okay, so the world has a being, it's reality, but why is reality the way it is? Because God, among many designs, alternative designs, he chose the one that, the actual one. So the world, its reality, its being that it is, its metaphysic, well, how it is, such as the, well, roughly put it, laws of nature, and also logic, how having been described, how the descriptions, especially in terms of sentences, how they relate to each other. So consider the world as it is. If we were to consider a world with different physical laws, it's not possible. It's only an epistemic possibility that gravity has a different, is a different constant with a different value. It's through ignorance that we thought that it could have been otherwise, and this has implication for the fine-tuning argument, because what seems to be an alternative is a mere epistemic possibility. It's not a metaphysical possibility. It couldn't have been otherwise, given the world as it is. So what seems to be a coincidence well, it is because God designed it the way to be this way. So, but then the universe, because within the world, given that the Big Bang theory is true, the universe is expanding. So the world has infinite spatial temporality, but the universe, or let's say the matter at least, expands, and how the universe is constituted by its galaxies, and galaxies are constituted by the planets and the arrangement. So with a different Big Bang, how it happened differently at a different time, or with different initial condition, or well, the outcome, the eventual universe, when the astronomical objects are in a certain equilibrium, it could have settled in a different way with an alternative universe. But the laws of nature are the same. They obey the same physical laws, especially given matter conservation. The arrangement could have been different. It is a metaphysical possibility that the universe is different, but the world could not have been different because of the design. The physical laws are the way that it is, but the universe could have been different, holding the physical laws fixed. So that's the difference between two ways to think about alternatives. But of course, so what is it? What it is for a world to have an alternative design? The world with alternative design, such as a world in which there are spheric cubes that there are cubes that are spherical, and or maybe there are water. There are water. The water is constituted by hydrogen peroxide. So these are impossibility. It could not have been, except if God designed the world differently. So, but God didn't design it differently in the actual, as it is in our world. the way the world is designed, it is the way that it is, given this design, given God's decision. Without the world, these are impossible. But maybe we would thought that it is possible because before we investigate further, so they are fictitious possibility at best. What could not have been because they're impossible, but at least we pretend the fact that there are spherical cubes are pretended fact. We pretend that there are these things, and the map projection, we project certain things, like project a cube that is spheric, we project some water that's constituted by H2O2, but those things are not real because what seems possible is not in fact possible, and it's due to our ignorance that we thought that they could have been the way that we thought they would be. So once the fantasy is revealed to be a fantasy, that it's not reality, it's not based on knowledge, then we'll know that what seems to be a possibility is in fact fictitiously so, not really so, it's in fact impossible. So it's like we're finding in doing science, let's say we're finding among various epistemically possible worlds, some are in fact not real. When we do science and metaphysics, we will come out to having discovered some possibilities to be impossible, merely fictitiously possible. So nature, what are we? In the world, what are we? Man, well, it's just to use the, to follow from the tradition that man and world, that kind of narrative that I use I meant mensch, or human beings. So what's specific to us human beings are that we have free will, that such that our actions are whatever state we're in right now, given our past conditioning, our learning, our genetics, our biology, our psychology, and whatever we're seeing, our perception, our prior knowledge, it is underdetermined by environment, by history, what we would have done in a posterior state of the world. So, or maybe even in the present. So that free will makes a difference to enables us to go beyond animality. So we're more than animal in terms of choices. And so an understanding of the Garden of Eden and the tree of knowledge. So I understand it as, so to eat from the tree of knowledge, well, of evil is through doing something in violation of God's command. And of course, there's the serpent that suggested that, to Eve, that you will not surely die. Well, maybe to understand that in an epistemic context, you might not die, right? And that because of human free will, we could have thought otherwise. Of course, the facts are, well, at least given the very simple statistical inferences, and whatever God said it is, then, but it is with our human free will that we could have formed some unreasonable, irrational doubt and thought that, oh, I might not die. So let me try. And then they discovered that, so that's how we are to do something evil. So that's how I understand that we to have the knowledge of evil. It's like animals, of course, they hunt and prey, the predator-prey relation, but there's a difference between hunting for sustenance, for food, and a kind of action that's in virtue of violating someone's goodwill, especially God's goodwill. So sin. So with human free will, there's a possibility of sinning. Sometimes we don't sin willfully, and then after Adam and Eve, then there's Cain and Abel, and Cain, out of envy, he committed murder, and that's willful sinning. He knows exactly what he was doing, and he pretended that. Well, I hypothesize a translation of the Hebrew phrase into, so am I not my brother's keeper? Why would I do that? So that's how I would understand Cain's wickedness, how he did a certain thing out of envy. That's an act of injustice, because Abel, he was rewarded justly. And what he did, he even pretended that he wants to cover up his willful sinning. So with free will, we could have thought differently, and we could have acted against humanity. We could have acted something not only beyond animality, but given that we could have perfected our humanity, we could have also acted the other way. So these are human beings, people like us, making choices within the world, and chances about what we will do next, disposition, a degree, an objective chance constituted by our free choice. So that's what makes a difference. After free will became a reality. So yeah, we could have done otherwise, but could we have been otherwise? And how is it that we could not have been otherwise? In what way we could not have? So that's one way we understand essence, what are necessary constituent of us, humanity. Well, teleologically, we are to be self-respectful. Humanity obligates respect. We should treat others, or in a Kantian way, to treat others as ends in itself. But physically, we are embodied brain, at least, because we need brain constitutes mind, certain psychology, and humanity, a certain mental. With free will, the transition of the mind is through agent causation. So that's what we are. We could not have been constituted by like a silicon-based artificial intelligence, for example. So that's one way I would understand humanity. So the essence of humanity, and there's also one way to understand logic, because once logically accepted that there are true contradictions, that logic, it's metaphysic. It's no longer a real logic. It's because it's impossible. That's not the real logic, because in reality, logic, it is contradictions are impossibly true. It is not possible to be true. So once you accepted contradiction as true, that's not within the realm of reality. The essence of logic and how it loses its reality is when contradictions are accepted as true. So once we accept true contradictions, so ontology simply, once we accepted fictitious beings, existence that are not real, then that ontology went beyond reality. So that there's the question of the metaphysic of existence, and what makes something real, has being. So a logic that's not real, that's the many discussion such as whether in the paraconsistent context, paraconsistent logic, whether and even a dialecticism, but at least here we can understand how we went beyond something and such that it loses its essence. And of course, existence. That's what I want to get at, is that this is how we are to understand existence, because so unicorn, we know that it's a mythological animal, so it's not real. It's we're never to find unicorn. It's just that it's well, it's mythical, how it came about, and its being. So how it is that unicorns do not have being? How is it that it's not real? Why? It is not real. That's something that I would get at later on, because so God, we think about what God is, the philosopher's God, the perfection, perfect power, perfect knowledge, perfect love. So is it real? An entity and a subject even like that? Is it real? So we could understand the metaphysic of a certain thing, but turn out that it doesn't have being, right? So so here's how I would argue for the reality of God, the perfect being. Was if you accepted that the following as a metaphysical fact, that the Big Bang in fact happened, it explained how the world is, especially with the especially having observed red shift. But it is a metaphysical fact that there are possibilities of difference, that Big Bang could have happened differently. So given my choice theory of possibility, metaphysical possibility, that chances dependent on choice. So it's in virtue of human free will that there are possibilities, though before human free will evolved, how is it that there could have been different ways that the Big Bang happened? So one answer, divine intervention within the world. So the world is already there, created, but the Big Bang, how it happened, God could have made a difference to how and when it happened in initial conditions. So if holding the metaphysical fact fixed and the choice theory of possibility, then God's reality would have explained that metaphysical fact. Of course, it's the choice theory of possibility. It has the consequences of, so before human free will, so there are no alternatives, right? It sounds strange, and one way to counter that counter argument is with God's reality. So that's a motivation for theism. But of course, then there's whether the intuition about Big Bang having a possibility of having happened differently, is it a reliable intuition? Whether we should bite the bullet, and the past before human free will, it couldn't have been otherwise. So that's my argument. Of course, given that there is divine intervention within the world, then we can understand Jesus, resurrection. That's at the core of Christianity, right? So Jesus, so Lazarus, life from death. So that's upon Jesus' decision to transform his body from death back to life. So it seems to be roughly put against laws of nature as we know it, right? So, and Yahweh also did something similar, but it's Jesus' life from death. So, and again, it's Yahweh's decision. In both cases, they are divine intervention. But of course, it differs from the kind of the creation in the creationist theory that the energy is conserved because it's only within an arrangement of the body, the biological changes that turn something from death to life, and that divine power within the world is a way to understand. So the power of prayer, with the following regularity, it is as if a law of nature. That if someone prayed that P, let's say, and if God approves of it, then it will be that P, something like that. So it's a nested conditional, and it is indeed a law that's part of the world. That's what the world really is. So it brings in God's decision within the world, having distinguished God's decision without the world. So here's a summary. I talked about creation, and especially how it is a decision, a choice from without the world, and how, given that decision without the world, that could have been otherwise, he could have made different choices, then how it is that we ended with the world, with the design that we have, but not the alternative. And given the world as it is, human beings evolved, and our nature, given history, and how we also have choices, and how choices relate to possibility. And if we are to understand possibility in terms of choices, then how is it that Big Bang could have been different? Because there were no human beings, there were no choices, there were people making choices. But then God, with his divine power, he could have made a difference within the world. And not only is theism motivated the reality of God, and we also understood prayer and the power of prayer, and the Christian and the Abrahamic tradition in a way that's describable in terms of a certain regularity. Thank you very much.